So I'm going to read from this chapter 5, which is the aviator and the airline. And some of these individuals, Trip we've mentioned, but we introduce Andre Priester and Hugo Leuteritz. We're in the first full year of the formation of Pan American Airways, which would be 1928. By December, its parent company, Aviation Corporation of the Americas, moved into a suite of rooms at the Channon Building at 122 East 42nd Street, across from Grand Central Terminal. It was also across the street from the Chrysler Building, which is under construction, where they would move next. Trip had one office, Chief Engineer Andre Priester the other. Chief Communications Engineer Hugo Leuteritz's office was a chair pulled up to Priester's desk. Trip's roll-top desk was against a wall with a table behind him. When he had visitors, he turned and talked across it. Trip never left without closing his roll-top, leaving some wondering what secrets lay within. One old-timer recalled, Trip was more like our god, and Priester was our boss, particularly at Key West, where he was the face of the company. Andre Priester's early life was that of the Arabian Nights. He descended from a sea captain shipwrecked off the coast of Java, where Andre's father was provincial governor. When Andre was born in 1892, his birth certificate was witnessed and signed by several Rajas. He grew up in surroundings akin to a royal court, a privileged life that ended at age 16 when his father died. Eager to see the world, he signed on with the crew of a cargo ship. Before Trip hired him, Priester distinguished himself at Kolinkalaka, Lukvaart, Metrapi voor Noordland aan Kolinanen, also blessedly known as KLM, as the Royal Dutch Airline, and my apologies to any native Dutch speakers. He was considered the first employee at the East 42nd Street office. Priester helped transform aviation's barnstorming culture into a business through strict rules of operation and emphasis on safety. As the airline expanded, he pragmatically favored flying boats as the aircraft carried its own airport, a necessity as there were no airports or emergency landing fields in the Caribbean or Brazil's coastline, but plenty of bays, rivers, lakes, and lagoons. Priester demanded that pilots reserve fuel and daylight. A flying boat landing at night in dark harbors risked crashing into driftwood or unlit fishing boats, and he would cancel an overwater flight if seas were too rough. Priester also believed in radio, a technology starting to come into its own. He believed radio was the answer to tracking and reporting changing weather conditions to airborne planes and airfields on the Key West to Havana route and points beyond. He brought aboard Leuteritz to lead Pan Am's radio communications effort. Hugo Leuteritz is one of the promising young wizards in the field when he joined the Radio Corporation of America, RCA, in New York. He acquired his amateur radio operator's license at age 13, researched radio at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and served as a junior radio expert aide in the Navy during World War I. When Leuteritz arrived at RCA, radio was about transmitting dots and dashes. Equipment was bulky and heavy. For 8 years, he focused on long-distance communications with less bulky equipment. Developments vital in adapting radio to aircraft. Finally, RCA directed the 28-year-old to investigate radio's aviation possibilities. The company was not ready to commit, Leuteritz discovered when he requested $25,000 to research a lightweight transmitter receiver. They said aviation was not ready for spending that kind of money, Leuteritz recalled. Fate intervened when Leuteritz got a call from Grant Mason and John Montgomery. They were directors at Pan American Airways. Around the time of the merger with the Trip Hambleton Whitney Group, they were investigating this radio thing, Leuteritz recalled. They had no idea what they wanted. They only knew they wanted radio for communications and perhaps some navigation. Leuteritz, still an RCA employee, took a train to Key West to begin experimental work for the airline. RCA was interested. Their research indicated Key West was a bad static area and would provide a good equipment test. The day after Leuteritz arrived at Key West, a boat followed with a 100-watt RCA transmitter. Leuteritz had done radio work for Colonial Air Transport, which Trip was the president of, in 1926, but when he met Trip for the second time, the conversation took an unexpected turn and he was offered a job. Andre will have nobody else but you, Leuteritz replied. Leuteritz replied the Pan Am only had a few planes and wondered if that would keep him busy. We will have a fleet of airplanes to fly to Latin America, the Atlantic, the Pacific, Trip answered. What you're talking about is a gamble, Loiteretz said. He also thought, one of us is nuts. Flying the oceans? Perhaps it was the audaciousness of Tripp's vision, but Loiteretz discussed the job offer with his boss at RCA, C.H. Taylor. Loiteretz decided to take the gamble, and Taylor graciously allowed a one-year leave of absence. The leave became permanent. Loiteretz was the start of Pan Am's radio division. It was a humble beginning, Loiteretz recalled. The only thing I had was the transmitter in Key West, and that was property of RCA.